Today I 3D printed this, which might look a bit random, but for a very good reason. Because if you're like me, you will have a ton of these cluttering up your workspace. So in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to show you how I turn these easily into these and make some cold hard cash in the process. Well, kind of. This is the Bambu Lab AMS, which not only revolutionised multi-material 3D printing, but is also stacked with some pretty cool features, like a humidity sensor for making sure your filament isn't too moist, and RFID detection so it knows what you're loading into it. But the only one I really care about for today's video is the filament backup feature, which will basically swap printing to another spool of the same colour and material when one runs out. The idea being uninterrupted printing of a model like this. So the question is, how does that help with all of these? Well, for a number of reasons, you might end up printing some sort of draft models, where colour and looks don't matter, like prototyping designs or models that you're going to sand and paint anyway. So instead of using nice shiny new spools for these prints, I can manipulate the AMS a bit to combine and use up all of these. Firstly, I need to load up 4 of these random spools of PLA into my AMS, shut the lid, head over to Bambu Studio and go to the device page. Then go down into the AMS section where it shows the colours and change all of these to exactly the same colour and material. It doesn't really matter what I choose, but I find the generic PLA calibration tends to work well for most types of PLA. Next, I go into this settings tab and make sure the AMS filament backup is ticked on. Then load up a model I want to print, which is this prototype version of a headphone stand we're designing. And lastly, once it's sliced, I make sure all 4 colours are still showing in the same slots. Click this auto refill icon where I can see the rotation cycle for all the filaments is going to do what I want it to do, hit print and let the AMS do its thing. After just over 2 hours, the prototype was finished and the AMS had done a perfect job of switching over. But what is this actually saving me? Well, this prototype used up around 170 grams of filament, and let's say at $20 a roll, some simple maths tells me that that's about $3.50 worth of filament, which instead of using up a brand new shiny roll of filament, has started using up my stack of these, which were probably going to sit there and get forgotten about. And to put that into perspective, you would have only had to print around 100 of these sort of prototype prints and an AMS would have paid for itself. Or only a couple of them, and you could sign up to our Patreon to support us and get access to all our 3D printable designs. There are a couple of things I've found when doing this that are good to know. Firstly, these little hooks over some of the spools, which I guess is where the spool is wound on in the factory. But I try to make sure these aren't too sharp a bend, because I've had a couple actually get stuck inside the AMS as it's pulled it in. Secondly, if you're planning just to leave this to print, then it's a good idea to load up a fairly full spool into the last rotation slot, just so you don't get caught a tiny bit short like I did on the headphone stand earlier. This will obviously only work as well with 2 of the same types of material, also PLA to PLA, but I haven't had any issues mixing different brands yet and not noticed any effects to the strength of the layer adhesion so far. And last but not least, light spools do have a habit of trying to flick out the AMS, so adding some of these spool weights will help stop any jumping or errors during the prints. This is basically just a way we found of saving some money on our old scraps of filament, so we thought we would share it with you in case you found it useful. But would love to know if there's anything else you do with them, or if you know an even better way to save money with them in the comments below.